I found my wife's AOL password on a sticky note beside our family computer. One click, and there it was, emails bragging about meeting her old high school boyfriend at a roadside motel while our kids napped at grandma's. So I hired a PI, served my wife at work, and then I rang the other man's doorbell. I didn't punch him. I didn't threaten him. I handed his wife the truth, and watched his entire life catch fire. If you've ever wanted justice without lifting a fist, just receipts, timing, and ruthless calm, hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in. This is how a quiet dad turned 2 passwords and a PI report into the most satisfying legal revenge you'll hear this week. There's a special kind of silence that lives in a house when trust starts leaking out of it. It's not dramatic. It's the clink of spoons in the sink. The soft click of a front door that closes a little too carefully. The sound of a minivan engine that should arrive at 4:30 but doesn't. We had 2 kids, 4 and 6. Old enough to tattle about snacks, young enough to parrot everything they heard. And suddenly they were talking about sleepovers at Grandma and Grandpa's, my wife's parents, 2-3 times a week. Her folks lived 90 minutes away. That's 3 hours round trip. On weekdays. For lunch. Babe, I asked one evening, keeping it light, are your parents okay with watching the kids so much? She didn't flinch. Didn't smile either. They love it, she said, and kept loading the dishwasher. She was calm in a rehearsed kind of way, the way you answer a question you practiced in the mirror. She's not a great liar. Never was. Her eyes go glassy, her sentences get too neat. That night I walked to the garage, looked at her tires in the half-light, and did something that felt both petty and necessary. I noted the odometer. By the end of the week she'd driven about 400 extra miles. The numbers didn't lie even if she did. I didn't rage. That was a promise I'd made to myself as a kid, no screaming, no scenes. My parents cheated on each other and used us as the battlefield. I swore the chain would break with me. So I waited. I listened. I watched. The break came with paper. Not a legal document. Not a credit card statement. A sticky note. Yellow, curling at the corner, casually stuck to the edge of our beige desktop tower like a grocery list, AOL password. She must have scribbled it down for herself before a shift at her part-time job. I stared at the handwriting that I knew better than my own. My fingers moved before I could talk myself out of it. Dial-up hissed and sang. You've got mail. I did, apparently. So did she. I didn't have to guess her username. She used the same one for everything, college nickname with a couple numbers. The inbox was a normal mess of chain letters and coupons, until it wasn't. An email thread with her college best friend. The subject lines were harmless, lunch tomorrow? LOL remember prom, but the bodies were knives disguised as confetti. Met up with, old boyfriend's name redacted, again. Same room. He's still married. She got fat after the kids. Kinda tragic. Dropping the kids at my parents', their town has that dumpy motel off the highway. Cheap and fast, LOL. There was more, like someone narrating a car crash in cheerful bullet points. Times. Days. Winks about tummy time that had nothing to do with toddlers. My hands went cold on the keyboard. Somewhere in the house, our daughter asked for water in her cartoon voice. I printed everything, 1 page at a time, each sheet spitting onto the tray like a verdict. I hid the papers under the water heater panel in the basement. Then I sat on the concrete and let the whirring in my head slow down. Anger would make me sloppy. Sloppy gets kids hurt. I needed facts. Dates. Faces. A buddy of mine on the force gave me a number. Ron, he said. Left the department for PI work. He's good. Careful. Discreet. Ron was all edges and notepads. No judgments, just questions. I slid him the emails and the odometer math. He nodded like a surgeon planning a cut. A week later I had a report. Times. dates, photos. My wife with a baseball cap low and her ponytail tucked, hugging the edge of a booth at a chain restaurant while a man leaned across with that fake intimacy married people stop practicing when they want to stop telling the truth. Then the motel, blue door, faded curtain, room paid cash. 2 hours. Sometimes 3. Then a shot of her minivan pulling into her parents' driveway, our kids' car seats visible through the glass like innocent observers. Confirmation hurts and numbs at the same time. The mind does this weird stutter. This is real. Then, it's been real for a while. Then, if you're me, don't make the kids pay. I hired a divorce lawyer that day. I told him my line in the sand, I would not weaponize the kids. We settled on everything that protected them and, frankly, protected me from myself, custody agreements, financials, timelines, practical boundaries like guardrails on a mountain road. But revenge? That arrived with a name. Ron didn't just track my wife. He found the guy. My wife's old high school boyfriend. Married. 3 kids. A VP of sales at a regional company owned by his father-in-law. Let me repeat that, his father-in-law signed his checks. The house they lived in? Also owned by her parents. Call it a coincidence. Or call it a loaded Jenga tower. I wasn't going to knock it over. I was going to take out a single block labeled truth and let gravity do the rest. I asked my attorney to finalize the divorce filings. I asked Ron for multiple copies of his report. Then I asked him to do one more thing. Serve my wife at work, I said. At 10 a.m. She'll be on register. He raised an eyebrow. You sure? I want her to see that this isn't a secret to be hidden. It's a consequence to be faced. And the guy? I'll handle the guy, I said. Well, his wife will. 10 a.m., my wife got the envelope at her workplace, neutral expression, a manager hovering politely, customers pretending not to notice the way strangers do when they're grateful it's not them. She texted me a single question mark. I didn't reply. The paper spoke fine. At 10:30, Ron rang a different doorbell. The other man's wife answered, a woman with 3 kids' schedules on the fridge and a ponytail made for practicality, not flirting. Ron didn't accuse. Didn't editorialize. He handed her the report, dates, photos, rooms, receipts. A map of the double life she hadn't agreed to live. What you do with this is up to you, he told her. I thought you deserved to know. We could have left it there and this would still be a revenge story. But sometimes one truth turns into another, and the dominoes don't stop at the hallway door. I did not call the father-in-law. I did not call his employer. But in families like that, the wife doesn't suffer alone quietly. She goes home to the people who taught her what fidelity means. And they look at the man they brought into their fold and count the costs. Court records are public if you know how to look. I knew. And what unfolded next was both expected and, if you've ever been cheated on, more satisfying than you're supposed to admit out loud. She emptied the joint account, her legal right to protect herself and her kids. She took the children. She left the house, and the owners of that house gave an eviction notice to the guy who'd been sleeping in it on false pretenses. Her father fired him. Not demoted. Not work from home to save face. Fired. The line read, termination for cause. That's employer language for you didn't just break trust, you set it on fire. He didn't leave quietly. Men like that rarely do. He went back to the house, demanded explanations from the woman who didn't owe him any. Her brother stepped in, because of course he did, and apparently broke the cheater's nose. Restraining orders followed. Charges. Nights in jail where the ceiling lights never turn off and your phone call doesn't fix things because the people you used to call don't pick up anymore. He had 3 kids. Every child support hearing is a math lesson you can't cheat through. His LinkedIn went dark. Then his name stopped showing up anywhere at all. Last I heard, he left the state. People ask if I felt bad. Here's my truth, I didn't feel good. I felt clean. There's a difference. The fire wasn't mine to set. I lit a match labeled honesty in a room filled with gasoline he'd personally poured. The boom? That was cause and effect. What about my wife? We divorced. The affair didn't change custody, but it did change me. I learned to say no. I learned to keep every conversation about the kids and nothing else. If it wasn't logistics, it was a closed door. When the youngest turned 18, our texts dwindled to calendar alerts. I don't hate her. Hate is a choke chain I refuse to wear. She's part of my kid's story, so she matters to me in that exact dimension and no more. Our kids know age-appropriate truth. I didn't paint their mother as a monster. I didn't paint myself as a hero. Life is messier than that, and they deserved a father who could hold complexity without collapsing. We healed. Not all at once. But steadily. There's a day I remember like a Polaroid, my daughter at 12, swinging her legs off a tall bar stool at a diner, looking at me over a grilled cheese like I was home. "Dad," she said, "you always tell the truth." I like that. If you've ever felt small in your own house, that line is a cathedral. I could live in it for 100 years. How it felt, moment by moment. When I first saw those emails, my chest went tight. It wasn't rage, it was pressure, like my heart had to push through more air to beat. My jaw clenched, and something primitive in me wanted to slam the laptop lid and pretend I hadn't seen anything. It would be so easy to go back to making pancakes and mowing the yard and letting refine echo off the drywall. But the brain whispers in those moments, and if you've ever lived in the fallout of infidelity as a kid, the whisper is loud. This is where you decide who gets hurt next. When I met Ron, I kept rubbing my thumb over the edge of his business card until I thought I'd cut a groove in it. When he slid the manila folder across the table, the paper rasp felt like sandpaper on my nerves. I didn't want to see the photos. I also couldn't not. He understood. He didn't push. He sat there in his quiet, professional presence and let me metabolize reality at my own speed. When the server handed my wife that envelope at work, I wasn't there. I was walking a cart down the cereal aisle in a grocery store across town, pushing past families while holding a list on a post-it. I watched my own hands reach for Cheerios and felt like an actor who'd forgotten his line. You can't see a vow breaking, you only hear it in the little sounds, the dull thud of a box landing in a cart, a sigh you pretend is about parking. When Ron knocked on the other man's door, I sat in my parked car 2 blocks away. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing. Choosing not to make this a scene with me at the center. Choosing to be the man I wanted my son to remember when he was 40 and telling his own kids about conflict without flinching. I watched porch light spill over a walkway. I saw a door open and a pair of silhouettes framed in yellow. Then the door closed, softly, this time, like the start of a new kind of silence. The kind that heals. Why this was the revenge that worked. It wasn't about hurting him. It was about telling the right person the truth. He could dodge me. He could gaslight my wife. But he couldn't lie to a woman who had his children's birthdays memorized and access to the bank account. He couldn't dodge a father who'd handed him a job and a house and expected a son-in-law, not a liability. Telling the truth to the right person at the right time can look like violence to the person who built their life on a lie. It isn't. It's gravity. The aftermath. Years later, I tried to look him up, morbid curiosity, I guess. Nothing. Digital dust. Meanwhile, his ex-wife? She went to work at her dad's company, learned the ropes, took over when he retired. There's a justice in that arc. The person who valued the family keeps it. The person who didn't loses the keys. As for me, co-parenting mellowed into parallel parenting, which mellowed into peace. When the kids graduated, we stood on opposite sides of the same photo and smiled like adults. We didn't clink glasses. We didn't hug. We didn't have to. The kids were the point. They always were. If you're waiting for me to say I fell in love again and everything's perfect, I won't. I dated. I learned what I want. I learned what I refused to carry. I learned that solitude can be a sanctuary, not a sentence. And yes, sometimes late at night I think about that sticky note. About how stupidly fragile a marriage can be. One password. One email. One Motel 6 off an exit ramp lined with fast food and sharp little lies. But I don't live there. I live where my kids laugh at a joke I made without trying too hard, and my house is loud on purpose, and the only document on my kitchen counter is a permission slip for a field trip I forgot to sign. I live where the truth is simple enough to fit on a post-it: protect the kids. Protect yourself. Tell the right person the truth. Let gravity do the rest. Wife served at work with divorce papers at 10 a.m. PI meets the affair partner's wife the same morning, hands her the full report, dates, photos, motel details. She cleans the accounts, legally, takes the kids, and tells her parents. Father-in-law fires the cheater, parents evict him from the house they own. Confrontations lead to restraining orders, criminal charges, and a broken nose courtesy of the wife's brother. Cheater leaves the state, ex-wife rises in the family business, OP divorces peacefully and puts the kids first. Deliver this section slow and cool, no gloating, just inevitable justice. Cheating is a choice. So is what you do after you find out. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I handed the truth to the person who deserved it most and let consequences do their clean, merciless work. Sometimes the sharpest sword you'll ever wield is a manila folder. If this story scratched that justice itch, hit like, subscribe for more true Reddit revenge tales, and tell me in the comments, what's the smartest, most lawful revenge you've ever seen? Your story might be the next upload.